The rope burns on her wrists told stories his ledgers never could. Silas Avery had inherited certainty along with his plantation, yet something in the woman's steady gaze made his hand freeze at the whipping post. Power had never trembled in an Avery's grip before, not in 3 generations of mastering Carolina's brutal rhythms. Mercy was weakness, his father had taught him, but as Amma's whispered plea reached his ears, "I beg you, just make it quick," the leather strap hung suspended between the man he'd been and the man he might become. What began as a moment's hesitation would soon ignite consequences. Neither could escape in a world where even a glance carried mortal danger. If this forbidden story pulls at your heart, subscribe now and whisper the place you're listening from. Dawn broke over the Carolina paddies, painting the water gold. Silas Avery sat rigid on his horse, ledger balanced on his thigh. His gaze swept methodically across the levee where workers bent in silent rhythm. He recorded each figure with practiced detachment. "Production is down in the north field," he said. His voice was cold. Jonah, gray-haired and weathered, nodded without meeting his eyes. "Rain damaged the eastern sluice, sir." Silas frowned. The excuse was reasonable, but weakness bred failure. His father's voice echoed in his thoughts. He tucked the ledger into his saddlebag and spurred his horse forward. The workers kept their heads down as he passed, all except one. Amma stood thigh-deep in murky water, her hands working the wooden gate with careful precision. Rope burns marked her wrists, raw and angry against her dark skin. "You there?" Silas called. "The gate needs to be sealed tighter." Amma's eyes found his, just for a moment. Something in her steady gaze unsettled him. Not defiance, exactly. Something else. Her fingers adjusted the mechanism with practiced skill. "Better," he said, surprised to find himself offering even this small approval. The overseer's stand-in, a wiry man named Hobbs, approached with an eager smile. "I can ensure she remembers proper technique, Mr. Avery." Silas noticed how Amma's shoulders tightened, how her breath caught almost imperceptibly. He found himself staring at the rope burns again. "That won't be necessary," Silas replied, turning his horse. "Just ensure the quotas are met." The sun climbed higher as he rode the perimeter. Silas felt unsettled. Something about the woman's movements, efficient, precise, almost graceful despite exhaustion, had registered in a way he hadn't intended. Tomorrow the household inspection would tighten discipline. The order of things demanded it. Silas felt a strange reluctance he couldn't name. He rode faster toward home. The yard baked under mid-morning heat as Silas conducted inspection. Household staff and field hands formed rigid lines, while Miriam, his widowed sister, observed from the veranda shade. "Where is yesterday's tally?" Silas asked, scanning the ledger. Hobbs pushed, forward, finger jabbing at a line. "1 rice measure missing from storage, sir. Someone's been stealing." Whispers rippled through the assembled workers. Jonah's face remained impassive, but his eyes flashed warning. "Who was responsible for the storeroom?" Silas demanded. Amma stepped forward, face composed. She stood straight despite visible exhaustion. "Well?" Silas felt Miriam watching him, measuring his response. "I secured the stores before sunset," Amma said. Her voice was steady. "The count was correct." Hobbs snorted. "Then you're a thief or incompetent." Silas studied her face. The woman had shown skill at the sluice gate. Carelessness seemed unlikely. "The rations will be withheld until the missing portion is accounted for," Silas announced. He felt Miriam stiffen behind him. Too harsh? Too lenient? Her judgment followed him like a shadow. "And the thief," Hobbs pressed. "Example must be made." Amma said nothing. Her silence calculated, weighing survival against dignity. "Bring her to the post at noon," Silas ordered, the words bitter on his tongue. Protocol demanded discipline. Order above all. As the gathering dispersed, Jonah approached. "Sir, if I might suggest—" "You may not," Silas interrupted. He felt trapped in machinery set in motion long before his birth. Miriam's skirts rustled as she returned inside. Her disapproval hung in the air. Amma was led away, her back straight, her eyes forward. No pleading, no protest. Something about her composure disturbed Silas more than tears would have. The noon sun would bring judgment. He retreated to his study, unable to forget the rope burns on Amma's wrists. The ledger lay open, accusations in neat columns. Noon heat shimmered over the whipping post. Silas stood with the leather strap heavy in his hand. Sweat tracked down his spine beneath his fine linen shirt. Workers were gathered in reluctant witness. Discipline required audience. Miriam watched from the shade, her face a careful mask. Amma's wrists were bound to the post, her back exposed. Fresh rope burns layered over old scars. Jonah stood nearby, his eyes fixed on distant trees. "Proceed," Hobbs urged, too eager. Silas felt a strange hesitation. The woman hadn't struggled or begged. Her dignity seemed to mock the spectacle they'd created. He raised the strap. His father would have delivered swift justice. His grandfather would have doubled the count. Then Amma turned her head. Her eyes found his. "I beg you," she whispered, voice barely audible. "Just make it quick." Something shifted in Silas's expression. The strap hung frozen in the air. The gathered crowd held its breath. Seconds stretched into an eternity. Silas lowered his arm, stepped forward. The knife from his belt flashed as he cut her bindings. Gasps rippled through the assembly. Hobbs stepped forward, outrage contorting his features. "Mr. Avery!" "Enough!" Silas's voice left no room for argument. "Return to your duties. All of you." Amma rubbed her wrists, confusion evident in her eyes. "Sir?" Jonah approached cautiously. "Take her to the house," Silas ordered. "Kitchen duties." Whispers followed him as he strode away. Authority fractured from within carried consequences. Every pair of eyes measured his weakness. Miriam intercepted him at the steps. "Brother, what was that?" "A decision," he said simply. Silas felt something crack within himself. Old certainties splintering under the weight of one woman's gaze. The strap hung limp in his hand. He'd have to answer for this. But the blade had stayed unused. The kitchen hearth blazed despite late afternoon heat. Miriam paced while Silas sat rigid at the small servants' table. "You've undermined everything," she said. "Father would never—" "Father is dead." Silas's voice was sharp. "This is my decision." Amma stood silently by the doorway, awaiting instruction. Jonah had delivered her as ordered, his face revealing nothing. "Kitchen duties and accounting," Silas continued. "She'll assist with the household ledgers." Miriam's laugh held no humor. "A field hand keeping books? I've seen her work. She's precise." Jonah cleared his throat. "Sir, if I may. Mercy can be fatal under watchful eyes." The warning hung heavy. Plantation neighbors noticed changes. The fragile order demanded compliance. "What's your name?" Silas asked, ignoring them both. "Amma, sir." Her voice was soft but clear. "Can you read figures, Amma?" She hesitated. Admitting literacy carried risk, but lying carried more. "Yes, sir." Miriam exhaled sharply. "This is madness." "You'll start tomorrow," Silas said. "Sarah will show you the duties." Amma nodded, her face carefully blank. But as she turned to leave, she paused. Thank you isn't what you want, she said quietly. So I won't offer it. Silas felt exposed under her steady gaze. What was your child's name? She asked suddenly. The question pierced his armor. Miriam gasped at the breach. Elizabeth, Silas answered, surprising himself. The name he'd forbidden to be spoken since the fever took her 4 seasons past. Something shifted in Amma's expression, recognition, not triumph. She nodded once and left. Miriam touched his shoulder. Brother. Enough, Silas said, his heart hammered painfully. Outside, shadows lengthened across the yard. Tabitha Reed would dine with them tonight. Her father's connections made her questions dangerous. Silas felt the world tilting beneath his feet. Candlelight danced across fine china as dinner progressed. Tabitha Reed's laughter rang too loud in the formal dining room. Silas found himself watching Amma instead. She moved with quiet efficiency, serving each dish with perfect timing. No wasted motion, no spilled wine. Your sister tells me there was excitement today, Tabitha said, her painted mouth curving. Something about leniency. Silas felt Miriam stiffen beside him. Estate discipline is hardly dinner conversation, Miss Reed. Of course. Tabitha's smile didn't reach her eyes. Father says softness leads to ruin in these matters. Amma approached with the wine decanter. As she reached for Silas's glass, her finger discreetly indicated a line on the nearby ledger, left open from afternoon accounts. Silas glanced down. A miscalculation in the rice column. His eyebrows raised slightly. Business matters bore our guest, Miriam interrupted smoothly. Tell us of your new mare, Tabitha. Conversation shifted to safer waters, but Silas found himself distracted. The woman had spotted an error he'd missed, an error that explained the missing ration. More wine? Amma's voice was carefully neutral. Yes, Silas said, studying her face. Had she known all along? Had she chosen silence over accusation? Tabitha watched their interaction with narrowed eyes. You allow familiar conversation at table? I value competence, Silas replied. The words felt strange on his tongue. Amma's face revealed nothing as she retreated to the shadows. Competence has its place, Tabitha said, her voice honeyed with warning. As do we all. Miriam changed the subject again, but damage was done. Questions had been raised. Silas realized he'd never credited the quiet skill that kept his household functioning. The silence stretched uncomfortably through dessert. Midnight oil burned low in Silas's study. Ledgers sprawled across his desk, columns of figures that suddenly seemed indecipherable. He rubbed his eyes. The error Amma had indicated glared up at him. 2 bushels misrecorded. Not theft, merely poor accounting. Hobbs had been wrong. The woman had been punished for nothing. No, not punished. He had stopped. The memory of the frozen strap troubled his sleep. Why had he hesitated? 20 years managing the plantation, and he'd never questioned discipline before. His father's voice echoed in his mind, condemning weakness. A floorboard creaked in the corridor. Silas looked up to see Amma passing with fresh linens. Their eyes met briefly before she continued. Wait, he called. She paused in the doorway, her face expressionless. You knew about the ledger error. It wasn't a question. Yes. Why not speak up? Amma regarded him steadily. Would you have believed me over Hobbs? The question hung between them, honest and damning. Silas felt something crack further in his certainties. You risked punishment instead. I calculated survival, she corrected. As we all do. Silas studied her in the lamplight. Education in her speech, precision in her movements, a mind he'd never bothered to consider. "The mistake will be corrected tomorrow," he said finally. "The rations restored." She nodded, neither grateful nor surprised. "Good night, Mr. Avery," she said, disappearing into the darkened hallway. Silas stared at the empty doorway. The story he'd told himself about his plantation, his position, cracked like thin ice. Guilt edged into the fractures. Tomorrow, he decided, changes would begin. The cost would come later. The candle guttered and went out. Morning light spilled across the manor steps as Silas addressed the assembled staff. Miriam stood beside him, her face tight with concern. Jonah watched from the side, inscrutable. "Hobbs will no longer oversee field operations," Silas announced. "I'll assume direct management." Murmurs rippled through the gathering. Hobbs stepped forward, face mottled with anger. "Sir, with respect." "Your services are terminated," Silas interrupted. "Collect your belongings." The staff exchanged glances. Such changes invited scrutiny. Neighboring plantations would talk. Questions would follow. "Jonah," Silas continued, "you'll supervise the Northfields." Jonah nodded slowly, understanding the responsibility being offered. "And discipline matters, sir?" The question hung heavily. Everyone knew what was being asked. "I expect order maintained," Silas said carefully. "But there are methods beyond the strap." Jonah straightened. "Sir, I won't flog anyone again. Not for you. Not for anyone." The declaration rang across the yard. An irreversible line drawn. Silas felt dozens of eyes upon him. Miriam's shocked, Hobbs's furious, and somewhere among the household staff, Amma's steady gaze. "So be it," Silas agreed. He'd ventured too far to retreat now. Hobbs spat on the ground. "The county will hear of this madness." "They likely will," Silas acknowledged. "You're dismissed." As the assembly dispersed, Miriam clutched his arm. "Brother, what are you doing?" Silas watched Hobbs storm towards the stables. "Something I should have done long ago." Across the yard, Amma stood with folded linens in her arms. For the first time, he saw something like hope flicker across her face. The Avery plantation had changed course. There would be no return to yesterday's certainties. Word would spread by nightfall. Dusk painted the kitchen garden in fading gold. Silas found Amma there, gathering herbs with methodical precision. Her fingers moved with practiced knowledge, selecting leaves that his own eyes could barely distinguish. "You know plants," he observed, keeping his distance. "My grandmother taught me," she replied without looking up, "before she was sold." The simple statement hit Silas like a physical blow. The human merchandise his ledgers tracked in neat columns suddenly had grandmothers who taught secrets of herbs. "I need to speak with you," he said. Amma straightened, wiping her hands on her apron. "I'm listening." "Your position in the household." Silas struggled to find words for this unprecedented conversation. "What happened yesterday changes things." "Does it?" Her voice was carefully neutral. "I want your help with the accounts," Silas continued. "Your eye for detail is valuable." Amma regarded him steadily. "I have terms." Silas blinked in surprise. "Terms?" "I will work. I will correct your ledgers. I will speak truth when asked." She counted each point on her fingers. "But you will not touch me. Not my hand, not my shoulder. Nothing." The boundary drawn between them was clear. Necessary. Silas nodded slowly. "Agreed." "And my people in the quarters receive fair rations." "Also agreed." Amma studied his face, searching for deception. "Why did you stop? At the post?" The question he'd asked himself through sleepless hours. "I don't know," he admitted. "Something wasn't right." "Nothing has been right," she said softly. For generations. The weight of inheritance pressed on him. Land, wealth, power built on bodies catalogued like lumber. I can't change everything, Silas said. But you've started something, Amma replied, and others are watching. The sun slipped below the horizon. In the growing darkness, two figures stood apart, locked into a visible change that invited dangerous scrutiny. Neither could guess the cost. Late morning sun streamed through study windows as Silas reviewed shipping manifests. Amma stood at the corner of his desk, examining columns of figures with careful attention. The Charleston shipment is short by 3 barrels, she noted, pointing to the discrepancy. Silas checked his own notations. You're certain? Count the total yourself. Her finger traced down the column. Either they're cheating you, or someone here is stealing. The accusation hung between them. 2 weeks had passed since Hobbs's dismissal. Changes rippled through the plantation, subtle shifts in routine, cautious relaxation of tensions. These shipments will arrive tomorrow, Silas said, indicating another manifest. Can you reconcile them? Amma nodded, taking the papers. Her fingers brushed his inadvertently. Both pulled back sharply, remembering her terms. Sorry, Silas said, the apology unfamiliar on his tongue. Amma's face revealed nothing. The delivery should be refused unless complete. Silas studied her. You understand commerce well for a slave? She finished, voice cool. My father managed accounts for a shipping merchant. Before. Another glimpse into the person behind the property. Silas felt discomfort crawl up his spine. Your corrections have already saved considerable sums, he acknowledged. A hint of pride flickered in her eyes before disappearing. Is that all, Mr. Avery? You can write as well, can't you? He asked suddenly. Not just figures. Fear flashed across her face before she controlled it. Literacy among slaves invited suspicion of conspiracy. Yes, she admitted, watching him carefully. Silas nodded, making no comment. Another secret to keep. That will be all for now, he said. As she turned to leave, Silas felt respect flicker beneath fear. Respect for her mind, her composure, her boundaries. Dangerous territory for them both. Outside, a horse approached at speed. Hoofbeats halted on packed earth. Silas stepped onto the front porch as Deputy Marshal Calhoun dismounted. The county official's arrival always brought tension. Marshal, Silas greeted stiffly. What brings you? Calhoun removed dusty gloves, his smile not reaching cold eyes. Routine inspection, Mr. Avery. Word travels about changes here. Miriam appeared in the doorway. Deputy Marshal, will you take refreshment? Much obliged, ma'am. Calhoun's gaze swept the yard where Amma crossed with a basket of linens. Interesting reorganization, I hear. No overseer? I've assumed direct management, Silas replied carefully. Calhoun nodded, writing in a small notebook. Unusual approach for a plantation this size? Perhaps, Silas acknowledged. But effective. Discipline matters require a firm hand, Calhoun continued, especially with news of unrest in Charleston. Jonah approached from the fields, hat removed respectfully. His eyes met Silas's briefly, warning, caution. No unrest here, Marshal, Silas assured him. Productivity has improved, in fact. Glad to hear it, Calhoun's pen scratched across paper. I'll need to inspect the quarters. Of course, Silas agreed, though his stomach tightened. Jonah will accompany you. Calhoun smiled thinly. And I'll speak with that one. He nodded toward Amma. Heard she's been elevated. Miriam stepped forward. She assists with household accounts, Marshal. Nothing more. Interesting choice. Calhoun made another notation. Very interesting. As the inspection party moved toward the quarters, Amma watched from the kitchen steps. Her eyes found Silas's, fear and resolve intertwined. Surveillance had crystallized, names recorded in official books. Danger became personal with each scratched note. Calhoun's muddy bootprint marked the path to the quarters. Evening shadows stretched across the quarters as Silas approached with a small wooden box. Workers returning from fields watched warily. Trust came slowly, if at all. Amma stood outside the communal kitchen, stirring a large pot of evening meal. Her eyes narrowed at his approach. "What brings you here, Mr. Avery?" Silas held up the box. "Salve for burns and rope cuts." Surprise flickered across her face. Several women gathered nearby, children clutching their skirts. Jonah emerged from his cabin, watchful as always. "I'll distribute it," Amma said, reaching for the box. "There's only enough for a few," Silas explained. Amma's hand stopped mid-air. "Then none will take it." "Pardon?" "All or none," she said firmly. "We don't accept special treatment." The women behind her nodded. Unity in small resistances. Silas hadn't anticipated this response. "There's not enough for everyone." "Then bring more tomorrow," Amma countered. "Or take this back." Jonah approached, his presence lending weight to her words. "The community stands together, sir." Silas felt himself measured by dozens of eyes. His new approach to plantation management faced its first real test. A small child coughed harshly, drawing his attention. The boy's wrists showed raw marks from field work. "I'll bring more tomorrow," Silas decided. Amma's shoulders relaxed slightly. "We appreciate that consideration." The words were formal, but something deeper flickered beneath. Acknowledgement that he had yielded to equitable care. "The marshal's visit?" Silas said quietly. "Did he question you harshly?" "He asked if I could read," she replied. "I lied." The shared secret hung between them. "Good," Silas nodded. "Be careful, he's watching closely." As he turned to leave, Silas felt Jonah's appraising gaze. The older man had seen masters come and go, promises made and broken. Only actions built trust here. Darkness fell as Silas walked back to the house. Afternoon heat shimmered over the yard. Workers froze at the sound of angry shouts. A boy of perhaps 12 stood trembling before Jonah, a broken tool at his feet. Silas strode from the house, drawn by the commotion. Household staff gathered at windows and doorways. Amma watched from the kitchen steps, face tense. "What happened?" Silas demanded. "The plow blade snapped," Jonah explained. "The boy was careless." The child's eyes were wide with terror. Old patterns demanded punishment for damaged equipment. "Take him to the post," a field hand suggested nervously, eyes darting to Silas. A test. Everyone watching, measuring Silas's commitment to change. Jonah straightened. "I will not flog a child for a broken tool." Silence fell across the yard. Such defiance would have meant immediate punishment weeks ago. All eyes turned to Silas. Authority challenged publicly required response. Silas felt Miriam watching from the veranda, felt Amma's steady gaze. The moment stretched, laden with consequence. He held out his hand. "Give me the strap, Jonah." Reluctantly, Jonah handed over the leather cord. The boy began to cry silently. Silas weighed the strap in his hand, feeling its familiar texture. Then, deliberately, he dropped it into the dirt. "Accidents happen," he said, loud enough for all to hear. "Fix the plow. Return to work." The yard collectively exhaled. The boy stumbled away, disbelieving his reprieve. As the crowd dispersed, whispers started immediately. The story would spread to neighboring plantations by nightfall, rumor becoming proof of rebellion. Amma's eyes found his across the yard. Something like respect flickered there, cautiously guarded. "You've chosen a path," Miriam said quietly as he climbed the steps. "Yes," Silas agreed, feeling strangely lighter. "I have." Nearby, a rider departed toward the reed plantation. News traveled fast in Carolina. Sunset painted the neighbor's veranda in golden light. Crystal glasses clinked as plantation families exchanged pleasantries. Underneath polite conversation, judgment simmered. "Silas," Thomas Reed boomed, "heard you've taken unusual approaches to management lately." Heads turned. Conversations paused. Silas felt Miriam tense beside him. "More direct oversight," Silas replied carefully. "Results speak for themselves." "Indeed." Reed's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Though discipline is its own necessity, wouldn't you agree?" Tabitha Reed approached, her elaborate dress rustling. "Father thinks you've gone soft, Mr. Avery. Rather romantic notions for a businessman." Silas sipped his brandy. "I wasn't aware efficiency was romantic, Miss Reed." "Oh, it's not efficiency they're discussing," Miriam interjected smoothly. "It's fear." Silence fell across the gathering. Challenging the social order, even obliquely, violated every code. "Strong words, Miss Avery," an older planter commented. "Your brother's methods concern us all. Security matters." "Shared methods maintained stability for generations," Reed added, voice hardening. "Deviation invites consequences." The threat lay thinly veiled. Silas understood perfectly. "My ledgers show improved production," he countered. "That's my only concern." "Is it?" Tabitha's smile turned predatory. "I've heard certain household staff have unusual influence." Silas felt heat rise in his face. Miriam touched his arm in warning. "Competent management speaks for itself," she replied for him. "Brother, shall we view the garden?" As they walked away, Silas felt isolation closing around him. Conscience carried a price in their society. "They're watching for any mistake," Miriam whispered. "Calhoun has friends everywhere." Across the lawn, Tabitha Reed whispered to a circle of neighbors, glancing his way. The social machinery had begun to turn against him. Silas felt oddly untroubled by the prospect. Wind howled like a wounded beast. Rain lashed the manor as the storm intensified. Silas paced before windows, watching lightning illuminate the grounds in harsh flashes. A pounding at the door interrupted his vigil. Amma stood dripping on the threshold, hair plastered to her face. "The river," she gasped. "The levee's breaching. Workers are stranded." Silas grabbed his coat. "Where?" "North Bend," she said, already turning back into the deluge. "Jonah's organizing rescue." They raced through mud and driving rain. The storm's violence matched the chaos ahead. Floodwaters churned, angry and brown, surging against earthen barriers. At the river path, Jonah had assembled a team with ropes. Through sheeting rain, Silas spotted figures clinging to trees on the far bank, cut off by rising water. "The current's too strong," Jonah shouted over the storm. Amma stripped off her outer garments. "We need a line across." Before anyone could stop her, she had secured a rope around her waist. "Wait," Silas called. She turned, rain streaming down her face. "They'll drown waiting for the storm to pass." Without hesitation, she plunged into the churning water. Silas watched in horror as the current caught her. The rope team paid out line, struggling to maintain control. "Pull her back," he ordered. "Too late," Jonah shouted. "She's committed." Through sheets of rain, they watched Amma battle the current. Her head disappeared beneath the surface, then emerged gasping yards downstream. "She won't make it," someone cried. Silas stripped off his coat and grabbed the second rope. "Hold fast," he ordered, securing it around himself. Jonah's eyes widened. "Sir, do as I say," Silas commanded. then plunged into the flood. The current's power shocked him. Cold water closed over his head, disorienting and violent. He fought toward Amma's struggling form, their hands connected mid-river. Together they battled toward the far shore. "Follow my lead," she gasped, finding a path through the current. For once, Silas obeyed without question. A child screamed into the wind as the floodwaters rose higher. Embers glowed in the abandoned chapel ruins. One day after the storm, survivors gathered in its partial shelter. Silas sat apart from the others, watching Amma tend to injured workers. Rain had stopped, but devastation remained. Fields flooded, structures damaged. The rescue had succeeded, all stranded workers saved, but at considerable cost. Jonah approached, offering a cup of hot liquid. "You followed her lead," he said quietly. "Never seen an Avery do that before." Silas accepted the drink. "She knew the river better than I." "She knows many things," Jonah replied, "if you'd listen." The night deepened around them. Workers eventually drifted to sleep, exhausted from the day's trials. Amma finally sat beside the fire, her face lined with fatigue. Firelight danced across her features, highlighting strength beneath exhaustion. "Thank you," Silas said softly. "Your courage saved lives today." She studied the flames, including yours. The acknowledgement hung between them. Hierarchy had dissolved in rushing water. "How did you learn to swim so well?" he asked. "My mother taught me," Amma replied, "before fever took her. She sang while teaching, said water remembers songs." Silas watched shadows play across her face. "My Elizabeth loved songs," he admitted, "before she died." The shared grief created momentary bridge between worlds. "Do you know what happened to my father?" she asked suddenly. Silas tensed. "He was sold to Charleston merchants, before I inherited the plantation." Amma nodded slowly. "I thought as much." "I'm sorry," Silas said, the words inadequate against generations of wrongs. "My freedom is not a gift," Amma stated firmly, eyes reflecting firelight. "It is a door I will open." The declaration hung between them, truth without compromise. Silas nodded slowly, understanding finally taking root. Intimacy of shared truth stretched between them in the darkness. No touch required to feel its power. Late afternoon sun slanted through the county clerk's dusty window. Deputy Marshal Calhoun leaned over a wooden desk, watching as official papers were stamped and filed. "These reports should be sufficient," Calhoun said, sliding documents forward. "Unusual activities at the Avery plantation." The clerk adjusted his spectacles. "Serious accusations, Marshal." "Necessary ones." Calhoun's finger tapped a specific paragraph. "Note the female slave, Amma. Evidence suggests involvement in planned flight." "Avery's a respected name," the clerk warned. "Respect must be maintained through proper order," Calhoun replied. "Documentation becomes our weapon." Miles away, Silas and Miriam rode homeward along a rutted track. Their visit to Charleston merchants had been productive, yet tension lingered between them. "Tabitha Reed was in town," Miriam said carefully, speaking with concerning animation to several planters. Silas adjusted his hat against the sun. "Gossip travels faster than truth." "This isn't mere gossip, brother." Miriam's voice tightened. "She specifically mentioned your attention to certain household staff." Silas reined his horse to a stop. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "I suggest nothing," Miriam replied, "but others insinuate much, Tabitha particularly." The implication hung heavily between them. Boundaries crossed invited dangerous speculation. "The storm recovery progresses well," Silas said, changing subjects. Amma's organizational skills have proven valuable. There, Miriam sighed. Even the way you speak her name draws notice. She has a name, Silas replied sharply. As do we all. Names carry weight in our world, Miriam cautioned. Be mindful which you speak with familiarity. They continued in silence, the road winding homeward through gathering shadows. Danger approached from multiple directions, documentation becoming chains more binding than iron. Stakes escalated with each scratched signature. Midnight darkness cloaked the quarters. Amma woke to pounding on doors and flickering torchlight. Shouts penetrated thin walls as children began crying. She rose quickly, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. Outside, chaos erupted. Marshal Calhoun stood in the yard, flanked by armed men. Workers were being dragged from cabins, forced to kneel in night-damp earth. Search everything, Calhoun ordered. Find those papers. Jonah emerged from his cabin, dignity intact despite rough handling. What papers do you seek, Marshal? Correspondence, Calhoun spat. Planning escape, conspiracy. A child darted between searchers. One man struck him with a rifle butt, sending the boy sprawling. Amma rushed forward. He's just a child. Rough hands grabbed her shoulders. Calhoun approached, torchlight casting his face in demonic relief. The house servant with unusual privileges, he sneered. Primary suspect. Commotion from the main house announced Silas's arrival. He strode into the chaos, coat hastily thrown over nightclothes. What is the meaning of this, Marshal? He demanded. Official investigation, Calhoun replied, waving a document. Information received about escape conspiracy. At midnight? Terrorizing children? Law doesn't keep gentlemen's hours, Avery. The child whimpered on the ground. Blood trickled from his temple. Amma's eyes found Silas across the yard. Her gaze held no plea, only fierce demand. Stop this, she said clearly, loud enough for all to hear. Choose, Mr. Avery, stop this or be this. The challenge hung in torch-lit air. Families watched, huddled together. Calhoun's men paused, hands on weapons. Silas straightened. Decision. Crystallizing. Get off my land, Marshal. Return with proper specific warrant or not at all. You're making a grave mistake, Calhoun warned. The only mistake was allowing this brutality, Silas replied. Jonah, tend to the boy. Everyone else, return to your homes. As Calhoun's men reluctantly withdrew, trust buckled between Amma and Silas. Intervention had come, but the violation remained. Safety was illusion on borrowed time. Pre-dawn light filtered through study windows. Silas hunched over his desk, quill scratching across parchment. Discarded drafts littered the floor around him. Miriam entered without knocking, wrapped in a dressing gown. You haven't slept. There's no time, Silas replied, not looking up. Calhoun will return with proper warrants within days. She approached cautiously. What are you writing? Silas pushed a completed document toward her. Manumission papers, Miriam gasped. Brother, you cannot. I can and must, he interrupted, beginning with Amma and the others Calhoun targeted. It's financial suicide, she protested, and social death. Perhaps. Silas continued writing, his face set with determination. I've also drafted letters to Quaker allies in Philadelphia. Arrangements must be made quickly. Miriam sank into a chair, her face pale. The consequences will come regardless, Silas finished. Calhoun has marked us. The only path now is forward. He reached for another blank page. His hands were stained with ink, his eyes red-rimmed from sleeplessness. You need witnesses for these documents, Miriam said softly. Silas looked up, truly seeing her for the first time since she'd entered. Will you stand with me in this? Miriam sat silently, torn between safety and right. Years of social conditioning warred against awakening conscience. "The plantation has been our life," she whispered. "Built on others' stolen lives," Silas replied. "I can no longer pretend otherwise." Outside, pink tendrils of dawn crept above the horizon. A new day approached, carrying irrevocable change. "I will witness," Miriam finally said, voice stronger. "But God help us all." Silas pushed the quill and ink pot toward his sister. With trembling fingers, she signed her name. Intention hardened into plan. There would be no retreat. Somewhere beyond the windows, a rooster crowed. Morning sunlight warmed the front steps where Miriam sat mending. The household attempted normalcy after the night's raid. Surface calm belied underlying tension. Hoofbeats approached. Miriam looked up to see Tabitha Reed dismounting, dressed in elaborate visiting clothes. "Miss Avery," Tabitha greeted with false warmth. "What a lovely morning." Miriam set aside her sewing. "Miss Reed, an unexpected pleasure." "I bring interesting news," Tabitha announced, settling uninvited beside Miriam. "Father has been considering a beneficial arrangement between our families." "Arrangement?" Miriam's voice remained neutral. "A marriage alliance," Tabitha clarified, eyes glittering. "Between your brother and myself." Miriam concealed her shock. "Indeed? Silas has mentioned no such possibility." "Men rarely discuss such matters directly," Tabitha smiled. "But the advantages are obvious. Our combined properties would be the largest in the county." Before Miriam could respond, more hooves pounded up the drive. Deputy Marshal Calhoun arrived, flanked by 2 men. "Miss Avery," he called, dismounting. "Is your brother at home?" "He's inspecting field damage," Miriam replied, rising. "What business brings you back so soon, Marshal?" Calhoun withdrew a paper from his coat. "Warrant for questioning a suspect." He smiled thinly. "One Amma. No recorded surname. Suspected conspiracy." Miriam's eyes narrowed. "The spelling on that warrant is incorrect." Calhoun glanced at the paper. "A minor clerical error." "Not minor in legal matters," Miriam countered. "An invalid document." Tabitha watched this exchange with obvious interest. Beneath polite exterior, she catalogued every detail for later gossip. Silas appeared from the side path. Seeing Calhoun, his face hardened. "Marshal, I believe we concluded our business last night." Calhoun waved the warrant. "New official business, Avery, concerning your house servant." Tabitha stood. "Mr. Avery, how interesting your plantation has become. Much more exciting than marriage negotiations." Silas glanced between them, understanding dawning. Public humiliation threatened to collapse fragile trust. The trap tightened from all directions. Dusk gathered around the abandoned chapel. Amma paced among fallen stones, waiting. Stars appeared one by one in deepening blue. Silas approached silently, stopping at respectful distance. "You wanted to speak privately." "Marshal Calhoun returned today," Amma said without preamble, "with a warrant bearing my misspelled name." "Miriam challenged its validity," Silas replied. "It won't hold." "This time," Amma's voice hardened. "He'll return with correct papers." Silence stretched between them. Cricket songs filled the darkness. "I must leave," she finally said, "with or without your protection." Silas stepped forward. "Amma—" "Hear me," she interrupted. "I will not be taken for questioning that becomes torture. I will not let others suffer for my position in your household." "The manumission papers are worthless if I'm imprisoned before they're filed," Amma finished. "You know this." Moonlight silvered the ruins around them. The same chapel where they had shared truths after the storm now witnessed their darkest moment. "I need more time," Silas said, desperation edging his voice. There is none left, Amma replied. The quarters will empty within days unless protection comes. I've stayed only to warn you. Silas felt hope dimming under imminent violence. Everything he'd built, fragile trust, tentative respect, balanced on knife's edge. I won't let Calhoun take you, he promised. Or anyone else. Words, Amma challenged. What actions will follow? Silas stepped closer, moonlight illuminating determination in his eyes. Public defiance. Tomorrow. I'll confront Calhoun before witnesses with full manumission documents. You'll lose everything, Amma warned. Perhaps, Silas acknowledged. But I've already lost what matters most. My humanity. I'm reclaiming it now. Amma studied his face, measuring sincerity against survival instinct. Tomorrow, then, she finally agreed. The only path forward was open confrontation. Night creatures sang around them, oblivious to human schemes. Dawn painted the manor porch in soft gold. Silas stood at the top of the steps, documents in hand. Beside him, Miriam remained pale but resolute. Jonah had positioned himself halfway between house and quarters. Behind him, the plantation's workers gathered in silent witness. Dust rose from the main road. Deputy Marshal Calhoun approached with 6 armed men. Their weapons glinted in morning light. Stand firm, Silas murmured to Miriam. Always, she replied. Amma emerged from the house, taking position behind Silas. Her face revealed nothing, but her eyes remained fixed on Calhoun's approaching party. The marshal dismounted, spurs jingling against wooden steps. Avery, he called, voice carrying across the yard. I have properly executed warrants this time. Stand aside. I cannot do that, Marshal, Silas replied clearly. Obstruction carries serious consequences, Calhoun warned, hand resting on his sidearm. So does persecution without cause, Silas countered. The armed men spread out, creating a half circle before the steps. Tension thickened the air. Final warning, Calhoun said. Produce the woman and any conspirators for questioning. Jonah stepped forward. There are no conspirators here, Marshal. Only people. Workers from the quarters moved closer, flanking Jonah. Not threatening, but present. Witnessing. You're surrounded by friends, Calhoun, Silas observed. County men who know your methods. Men who understand the importance of order, Calhoun corrected. Is that what you call it? Miriam's voice rang clear. Strange order that requires midnight raids on children. Several armed men shifted uncomfortably. One whispered to another. Private conviction had become public stand. Lines drawn in morning light could not be uncrossed. Morning sun climbed higher as the standoff continued. Neighbors had begun to gather at the edges of the yard, drawn by rumors and commotion. Silas descended 3 steps, holding documents aloft. Before these witnesses, I declare my intentions. Calhoun's face darkened. Step back, Avery. These are manumission papers, Silas continued loudly, for Amma and 20 others named within, properly drafted and witnessed. Gasps rippled through the growing crowd. Tabitha Reed pushed forward, eyes wide with scandal. You have no authority, Calhoun began. I have every legal right, Silas interrupted, as property owner, to dispose of assets as I see fit. Amma's eyes narrowed at the clinical terminology, necessary language for necessary documents. Furthermore, Silas continued, I have here ledgers documenting systematic graft by county officials. He nodded to Miriam, who stepped forward with bound account books. Falsified inspection reports, she announced clearly. Diverted shipments, missing tax revenues, all meticulously recorded. Calhoun's face contorted. Lies and slander. Verifiable facts, Silas countered, with corroborating accounts from 3 neighboring plantations. The armed men exchanged uncertain glances. their loyalty to Calhoun balanced against self-preservation. A county clerk pushed through the crowd, summoned by neighbors. "These are serious accusations, Mr. Avery." "Documented ones," Silas replied, handing over a ledger. "Examined by my sister and confirmed by independent parties." The crowd hesitated. The balance of power wavered. Calhoun drew his pistol. "Enough theatrics." Workers tensed. Jonah stepped forward protectively. "Lower your weapon," a new voice commanded. The sheriff had arrived. The cost had been declared. There would be no retreat. Afternoon sun beat down on the road to town. Calhoun sat rigid in a wagon, hands bound, expressions thunderous. County men flanked the vehicle. "Held pending inquiry only," the sheriff reminded Silas. "Powerful friends may yet intervene." "Let them," Silas replied. "The documents speak for themselves." Amma watched from the manor steps as the procession departed. Not victory, but breathing space hard won. Jonah approached Silas as the dust settled. "What comes next?" "Implementation of the papers," Silas answered. "Legal freedom for those named. Practical freedom will take longer." "And the others?" Jonah pressed. "Those not on your list?" The question carried weight. Partial justice remained injustice. Silas met his gaze directly. "One battle at a time, but I give you my word, all will be addressed." In the quarters, families gathered in doorways, watching. Hope and skepticism warred in equal measure. Promises had been made before. Miriam joined them, exhaustion evident in her face. "The neighbors are already departing. Social death comes quickly." "Some things matter more," Silas said quietly. Amma approached, her movement drawing all eyes. For the first time, she stood before Silas without deference or fear. "The papers require filing in Charleston," she noted practically. "Tomorrow," Silas agreed. "I'll take them myself." "I'll accompany you," she stated, not asking permission. Silas nodded. "As you wish." Around them, the plantation absorbed the day's events. Not revolution, the system remained intact, but a blade stayed, a breach created. "What of Calhoun's allies?" Miriam worried. "They'll come," Silas acknowledged. "But not today." The afternoon stretched before them, full of uncertain promise. For now, it was enough. Sunset painted the chapel ruins in fiery gold. Silas waited, documents in hand, heart uncertain. Months of struggle had led to this moment. Amma approached, dressed simply for travel. Her eyes took in the weathered stones where they had sheltered after the storm, shared truths in darkness. "The papers are complete," Silas said, offering the bundle. "Freedom, land transfer, and funds." Amma accepted them carefully. "You're selling portions of your inheritance." "Restitution," he corrected. "Not charity." She nodded, understanding the distinction. "And the others?" "Jonah oversees their arrangements," Silas explained. "Some will depart for Philadelphia. Others will work the land transferred to their ownership." The setting sun cast long shadows across broken stones. A chapter ending, another beginning. "Will you go north?" Silas asked, the question he'd avoided for weeks. "First to the free settlement near Charleston," Amma replied. "My father may have family remaining there." Silence stretched between them, laden with unspoken feelings. "I have no right to ask anything of you," Silas finally said. "No," Amma agreed. "You don't." She tucked the papers safely into her travel bag. "Freedom first, Mr. Avery, any future second." He nodded, accepting her terms as always. "Safe journey, Amma." She studied his face one last time. "Goodbye, Silas." As she walked away, dignity and agency in every step, Silas remained among the ruins. The cost had been high: social standing, wealth, certainty. Yet something invaluable had been gained: His humanity, reclaimed. 6 months later, in a small cabin near Charleston, Amma broke the seal on a letter. No pleas, no expectations, only proof of continued change. Land transfers completed, additional manumissions filed, small victories against an entrenched system. She traced the signature with her fingertip, remembered rain-soaked courage, quiet defiance, boundaries respected. Taking up a pen, she began to write. New equilibrium established, dignity, agency, and love possible only on equal ground.